So it finally happened. 2 Democrats targeted for their political leanings by someone who was dressed up in tactical gear and was impersonating a police officer. These were clearly politically motivated killings. They targeted 2 Democratic politicians that were active in Minnesota politics and were integral in actually pushing through a Democratic agenda. And we had a tie in the Democratic House, which now is going to the Republicans. And in the Senate, we had a 1-seat majority, which is now going to be a tie. So what happened here? Speaker of the House, Emerita Melissa Hortman, and her husband was shot and killed. Senator John Hoffman and his wife were also shot. And thankfully, it looks like Senator John Hoffman and his wife are going to survive. And unfortunately, Melissa Hortman and her husband were shot and killed. Even their dog was shot and killed. So, Democratic House Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were shot and killed Saturday morning at their home in Brooklyn Park in what Governor Tim Walz called a politically motivated assassination. During a news conference Saturday morning, the governor also confirmed that DFL State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, were also shot multiple times at their home in Champlin. They were both out of surgery, and Walz said he was cautiously optimistic about their chances at survival. And so we can take a quick look at Walz's comments here.
Thank you for being here. In a moment, you'll hear from law enforcement officials who will share with you what they can as up-to-minute update on the situation here in Minnesota. You're going to be joined by Commissioner Bob Jacobson, BCA Superintendent Drew Evans, State Patrol Colonel Christina Bogoyevich, Champlin Park Police Chief Snyder, and Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley, as well as the Mayor of Brooklyn Park. We're here today because an unspeakable tragedy has unfolded in Minnesota. My good friend and colleague, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination. Our state lost a great leader, and I lost a dearest of friends. Speaker Hortman was someone who served the people of Minnesota with grace, compassion, humor, and a sense of service. She was a formidable public servant, a fixture and a giant in Minnesota. She woke up every day determined to make this state a better place. She is irreplaceable, and we've been missed by so many. Minnesota's thoughts and prayers are with her family, her loved ones, her children, and her parents. My prayers also go out to State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, who were each shot multiple times. The Hoffmans are out of surgery at this time and receiving care, and we are cautiously optimistic they will survive this assassination attempt. This was an act of targeted political violence. Peaceful discourse is the foundation of our democracy. We don't settle our differences with violence or at gunpoint. In the state of Minnesota, and as recently as last week, in the most closely divided state legislature in the country, we sat down, we worked things out, we debated, we shook hands and compromised, and we served the state of Minnesota together. We proved that it's possible, even in these politically charged times, to find compromise and adhere to the principles of democracy and civil discourse. We must all, Minnesota and across the country, stand against all forms of political violence. At this precipice moment we're on, this tragic act here in Minnesota should serve as a reminder to all of us. The democracy and the debates in the halls of Congress, in state houses, in school boards, is a way to settle our differences peacefully and move society to a better place. We're collaborating with all local, state, and federal agencies on a full investigation. We're committed to keeping Minnesotans informed as the situation continues. I assure you that those responsible for this will be held accountable. And each and every one of us are committed to making sure that a tragedy like this never repeats itself in Minnesota or across this country. I'd now like to turn it over to my public safety team to fill you in on the specifics of this ongoing investigation.
So one thing that we can talk about right off the bat is how this was clearly a politically motivated assassination. They targeted two people that were integral to Minnesota state politics. They killed the top Democrat in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House, the one who was the most vocal about leading the charge against Republicans' attacks on democracy, and she was just assassinated. I remembered her name, and that's because she was a part of this NPR story covering this dispute between the Republicans and the Democrats in the House of Representatives. And that's because there has been a very messy session of the House of Representatives and the Senate. Some of you may remember that Senator Justin Eichhorn had just recently resigned in disgrace due to soliciting child sexual prostitution, sexual favors from an underage girl. And that led it from what was a 34, okay, let's just go over this crazy session. So there was a 1-seat advantage for the Democrats. Then a Democratic senator dies of cancer. Now there's a tie in the House. Then a Democrat won that special election. Now there's a 1-seat advantage for the Democrats. Then a pedophile resigns in disgrace, and there's a 2-seat advantage for the Democrats. Then a Republican won, replacing the pedophile. There's a 1-seat advantage for the Democrats. Now, John Hoffman was just shot and can potentially be killed. Even if he survives, he's going to be in no position to actually do any kind of lawmaking. And so essentially there is a tie now in the Senate of Minnesota. There was also a state Senate special election in where, because Kelly Morrison resigned so she could run for Congress, but in the most recent election, there was all of these scandals. Then we can take a look at the House of Representatives and see the crazy history in this session where they won. There was a 1-seat advantage in the House of Representatives, and then there was a challenge where the Democrats lost a candidate because there was a mix-up on his forms that he filled out where he wasn't actually a resident of the city that he wasn't a resident of the district that he won the election in, and so his election was overturned. The Republicans were also challenging another representative because his election was too close, and so they said that he couldn't actually serve because it was so close, and so he doesn't have the right to serve on the House of Representatives. But then the judge overruled that objection and he was able to serve. Another Democrat was actually able to run, and so it was all tied up. So when all of the dust was settled, it was tied up, and now the top Democrat in the Minnesota House of Representatives was just assassinated, causing it from being a 67-67 tie to a 67-66 advantage to the Republicans. And so not only is this a very clearly politically motivated assassination attempt, assassination success, and hopefully attempt in one case, which does serve to further intimidate Democrats, further embolden right-wing extremists, but it also has a very tangible and physical impact on what kind of policies Minnesota is now going to be able to pass or unable to stop from passing. So this is an insane event with massive ramifications.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. My name is Drew Evans, and I'm the superintendent at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I want to start by just expressing our deepest sympathies to the communities, the family, the friends, and everybody that cared about the individuals that were gunned down today. When we have individuals like this in our political leadership. They're not only political leaders, but they're members of the community, well-known members of the community, that the tragedy in a situation like this is not only for them, their friends and families, but us collectively, the communities they represent, us as a state of Minnesota as a whole. About 2 a.m. this morning, there was an original call in the city of Champlin where there was an individual that had shot Senator Hoffman and his wife. Police responded to that location. They were dealing with that and working through that process overnight. And then later on, at approximately 3:35, another call came in when it was officers proactively checking because they knew of the incident that occurred, and they were going to check on Speaker Hortman at that time, at which time Brooklyn Park police officers encountered the individual who immediately fired at them, and they exchanged gunfire, and then the individual was able to escape during that exchange of gunfire. At the residence in Champlin, there was life-saving measures that were provided there. Both individuals were transported, as was previously noted, and they both received surgeries for their injuries at the hospital, and their conditions are at this time, both those individuals, Senator Hoffman and his wife, are both alive at this time, but they suffered gunshot wounds and are obviously in a difficult situation. But we're cautiously optimistic that they will continue to improve. At this time, it is a very active scene still, as you've seen. The Brooklyn Park Police Department, along with other members, the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, State Patrol, FBI, BC, and many others are actively engaged in a manhunt for the individual that we believe is responsible for this. And so we'll be sharing that identity with those individuals as this progresses, but I'm going to caution you, I know there's going to be a ton of interest in this. We're not at the position we can do that as we're actively searching for that individual. Right now, just as noted, we have teams. Hennepin County Sheriff's Office in Champlin are working at the scene there that occurred there, and then we are also, as we're stabilizing this between Brooklyn Park, working on the homicide investigation with Brooklyn Park Police, the BCA, FBI is assisting there as well, and we'll be conducting a crime scene investigation there, and then the individuals that were killed will be doing autopsies of those individuals to determine the extent of their injuries and how they passed away. But it was from gunshot wounds. At this time, I will answer questions after Commissioner of Public Safety Bob Jacobson speaks, but we'll be happy to take a few questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Evans. My name is Bob Jacobson. It's my honor to serve as the Commissioner of Public Safety for the state of Minnesota. This is a dark day today for Minnesota and for democracy, but we will not allow fear or violence to define who we are or how we move forward. We will stand together and we will stand strong. Our hearts, of course, go out to the victims, their families, their colleagues at the Capitol, and to the communities that they serve with dedication and with integrity. These are public servants, leaders who committed their lives to improving the lives of others, and they were targeted in a violent and cowardly way. The suspect exploited the trust of our uniforms, that our uniforms are meant to represent. That betrayal is deeply disturbing to those of us who wear the badge with honor and responsibility. We want to reassure the public that there is increased security in place for elected officials and others who may be at risk. If you see anything suspicious, especially involving individuals impersonating law enforcement, please report it immediately by calling 911 or your local police department.
I mean, come on. This is a little bit tone deaf considering the environment we're in today, where masked, unidentified thugs are just picking people up off the street, saying that, you know, you're going to have to come with us, we're law enforcement, and just arresting people that they have no idea who they're arresting, and saying that it's because they're following the law, following President Donald Trump, and you have to do what we're telling you to do, otherwise you're a criminal. Like, when masked ICE agents are covering their identities, they have no identifying marks on them, They're showing up in just regular cars and saying, you have to come with us. And now you're going to come out and say that you shouldn't follow law enforcement if they're not identifying themselves. It's a little bit tone deaf in the situation that we find ourselves in today. And I think that this is an important aspect of the story, too, where we have seen violence being used in a more political method. Alex Padilla, he just got thrown to the ground and handcuffed because he was asking Kirsty Nome a question and he started walking towards her. He is a senator from the state of California, a federal senator. We have these. You had Ross Baraka getting detained by ICE and taken to an undisclosed location. You're seeing more and more violence against senators and just against politicians and just against people that are resisting Donald Trump's regime. So obviously all of the protests that have been going on, the Get ICE Out of LA protests, people have been getting arrested. They've been getting beaten, shot in the head with rubber bullets, sprayed with tear gas. That is violence against political opponents. When you have a president of the United States that does not shy away from using violence against political opponents, then you're going to get people that think violence against political opponents is fine and it's condoned by the president. Like, obviously, this person is going to be tried by the state of Minnesota. But would you be surprised if you see a situation in which Donald Trump pardons this person? Or if the next MAGA governor, or if the next governor of Minnesota becomes a mega governor, would you be surprised if you see that governor pardon this person? People want to pardon Derek Chauvin, people want Trump to pardon Derek Chauvin, who did violence against an unarmed person, but they say that he was tried unfairly and so he should be pardoned. Donald Trump pardoned all of the people that violently raided the Capitol and would have killed politicians that they thought stood in the way of their political goals, and he pardoned all of them. So we literally have an unhinged, unreined-in dictator who is condoning violence against his political enemies and using unmarked cop-like figures to do illegal violence against the minority groups that he has been demonizing and has been scapegoating. And it really is no surprise that we now have a situation where someone dressed up as a police officer and broke into the top Democrat person's house, a top Democrat politician's house, and murdered her husband, her dog, then drove 15 minutes away and did the same thing to a state senator. He didn't target two Democrats in the House of Representatives. He specifically targeted one House representative and one Senate politician. So he was trying to give the Republicans an advantage in the Minnesota state legislature. It's just wild to me that this is happening, but it's honestly surprising that this hasn't happened sooner. This is the end result of a Trump regime using violence against its political enemies.
With that, I'll step back and we will be available for any questions. Thank you.
One reminder, please, as you ask your first questions, please don't forget to introduce yourselves, your media organization, and to the folks answering the questions, please don't forget to repeat the question.
So can you say it one more time? So you were just going to proactively check on Speaker Emeritus Hortman, and then police there encountered the gunman or someone with a gun and exchanged gunfire. Can you just go over that one more time, please?
I can. Good morning, Police Chief Mark Bruley, Brooklyn Park Police Department. The question is, how did we get to Representative Hortman's house, and it was proactively or not. The circumstances that unfolded in Brooklyn Park this morning is that we assisted the Champlin Police Department on a shooting. That shooting was made aware by one of our sergeants that it was at Senator Hoffman's home. In hearing that very intuitive sergeant asked our officers to go check on Melissa Hortman's home, a representative that lives in our community, just proactively as due diligence to swing by. That police officer and his partner pulled down the street when they arrived at Melissa's house. They noticed that there was a police vehicle in the driveway with the lights, emergency lights on, and what appeared to be a police officer at the door coming out of the house. When our officers confronted him, the individual immediately fired upon the officers, who exchanged gunfire, and the suspect retreated back into the home.
Was this an actual police officer or impersonating police officer?
Yes, the question is, was it a real person or a person impersonating a police officer? It was not a real police officer. This is somebody that clearly had been impersonating a police officer, again, using the trust of this badge and this uniform to manipulate their way into the home.
So Chief Burley, Janet Shortle, Pier 11, the person not only was wearing a badge posing as a police officer, when they approached their victims, they had a car with lights and sirens?
Yes, the question is what kind of vehicle, how were they dressed? They did drive a vehicle that looked exactly like an SUV squad car. It was equipped with lights, emergency lights that looked exactly like a police vehicle. And yes, they were wearing a vest with taser, other equipment that would, a badge very similar to mine, that no question, if they were in this room, you would assume that they are a police officer.
Chief Burley, can you describe the moments after that played out? You said the person went into the home, and then can you help us understand the next 10, 15 minutes of how we got to the point we're at now?
Yeah, briefly, although I'm just going to remind us that this is an absolutely an active investigation. We have thousands of people sheltered in place in the city of Brooklyn Park right now. We are in an extensive manhunt involving hundreds and hundreds of police officers and SWAT teams searching, gridding off areas, as we believe confidently the suspect had fled out the back of the house after being confronted by the police. Very briefly, after the officers had exchanged gunfire and the suspect retreated into Melissa's home, they immediately went up to the threshold and looked in and seen a male that was down, clearly had been struck by gunfire. They made limited penetration, grabbed a hold of the male and drug him out to safety to attempt first aid. However, he was pronounced dead shortly after that. At that point, the officers surrounded the house, got additional resources and SWAT resources, and then ultimately went in with a drone identifying a female in the home.
How far apart are the two scenes? About 8 miles?
I would say, yeah.
Bro, the cops can't even go into the home to see if there's anyone else that was dead. They knew it was the Speaker of the House's home, and they ran out and waited for SWAT to show up, and then they sent in a drone. I mean, I'd imagine that they were already dead by the time the police showed up there, but still, that is wasting valuable time for people who desperately need medical attention immediately. But this is really important to talk about too, because this person, this police officer here, said that the assassin dressed up like a police officer to the point where if they were standing on the stage right now, they would just think that they're another cop. They had a car with lights and sirens on. They had tasers, they had a gun, they had a badge, they had the uniform, and they just show up and then they assassinate the people that are living inside the house. This is really terrifying to think about. But one thing that you should keep in mind is that it's not that you shouldn't trust police officers any more or less than you already do, but if you have obviously people that are unidentified, don't trust them. However, if it's one person, definitely don't trust them, because if it's one person, that could indicate that they aren't part of a broader organization that does have state backing. That could be a indicator that they are a lone shooter. So really, if you're going to try to worry about like how you're going to keep yourself safe, if you are someone that you think could be targeted for political violence, or if you are just like don't want to get shot by an extremist that's dressing up as a cop, just know that like most extremists aren't going to have groups of people with them. And so if it's a lone cop, definitely don't fucking trust them, and especially if they don't have any kind of identification or markings that you can call up and demand to speak to the manager to, or their supervising officer.
Somewhere around 5 or 6 miles apart.
How much do you know about if the person that was impersonating an officer who allegedly shot these people, did they knock on the door and people came to the door, or did the person break into the home?
Yeah, it was knocking on the door and asking the person to come out, absolutely impersonating a police officer.
Do you all have a suspect's car?
We do have the suspect's car. Suspect is on foot. That is what the large-scale search is currently going on. I just remind residents of Brooklyn Park, I know it's been a long time, but those that are in the grid that we gave the alert out to continue to shelter in place. We're also reminding them that if somebody comes to the door and they knock on the door and is claiming to be a police officer, please do a couple of things. One, call 911 and confirm that the officer belongs there. If they are a police officer, dispatch will be able to confirm that that person is a police officer. Also, we've informed all our officers in Brooklyn Park that they are not to approach anybody by themselves. They're to approach in pairs, meaning 2 officers. So if there's only 1 officer outside the door, do not answer the door and call 911. If it's a Brooklyn Park police officer or any of our partners that are assisting, they will come in pairs of 2 or more.
Yeah. Call 911 and definitely don't cooperate with anyone who just shows up by themselves. But definitely always call 911, like especially if you live in the area where there is an active manhunt for this person going on right now. But even just in general, because we're going to see people dressing up as ICE, as cops, I think more and more often, because it's a way that they know they can get people to comply, and a way that it's going to be easier for them to do whatever they came to do, whether it be to beat someone up, whether it be assassinate someone. And as they say, like, oh, cops have always been able to demand someone open their door. Why are you acting like it's such a big deal right now? Well, it's a big deal right now because we have unidentified ICE agents just enforcing their will on people without any kind of warrant, without any kind of identification marks, without any kind of purpose to it. Their mandate is to detain and then eventually deport as many people as possible. And so when you have a situation where there are hundreds of thousands of people being detained for no reason without any kind of due process, that makes it easier for people that want to enforce their own power, and they're not institutionally backed like ICE or like the police officers, to just simply buy a tactical vest, buy a fake police badge, and do their own thing. And people aren't going to ask questions because they're used to it now.
I'm sorry, one at a time.
Do you know if the gunman said anything, like when he knocked on the door, did he say anything to like Senator Hoffman?
We do know that he did, but I'm going to hold that back as part of the investigation right now.
You guys did detain someone for information? Is that accurate?
This is a very large-scale search, so we have detained several people and questioned them, but we do not have anybody in custody at this time.
I know you may not want to identify that person publicly, but have you privately identified the suspect?
We have people of interest that we are looking for.
Michelle Griffin, Minnesota Reformer. Other than that, these are 2 Democratic lawmakers. Is there anything else to suggest that this is politically motivated?
Again, I'm going to hold back most of the information. This is part of the investigation that we completed. This is rapidly evolving, just occurred a few hours ago, and we're trying to sort it out. We have partners from the FBI, the BCA, the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, and almost every suburban agency in our community helping us with this. So it's very complex and working on it. What I will tell you, when we did a search of the vehicle, there wasn't a manifesto that identified many lawmakers and other officials. We immediately made alerts to the state who took action on alerting them and providing security where necessary, and that's about, I'll stop there.
Chief, thank you very much. We're going to take one more question.
True with the BCA, can I have just, you use the word targeted, and that's kind of along the lines of Michelle's question in terms of politics, Democrats and Republicans. These are both Democratic lawmakers. You said the word targeted, so targeted because they're politicians or targeted because they're Democratic politicians?
So the question is were they targeted, and when I use the term, why am I using the term? As Chief Bruley noted, there was a list of individuals, and the individuals that were targeted in this situation were on that list. And so when we're looking at that, as Chief Bruley said, it's far too early in the investigation to be able to provide information, but I do think we'll be in a position where we'll be able to develop the motivation behind these attacks, and we'll be able to provide more information as this unfolds. And so that's part of the reason we're using it, is I think there's some preliminary information that is telling us kind of where this is headed, but we need a lot more work done by all the teams that are here working on that to be able to provide that with you with a degree of accuracy.
No, it wasn't targeted. He just happened to drive 15 minutes and just randomly shot another Democratic politician that breaks a tie or brings it to a tie in the Minnesota State Senate.
Thanks. Thank you.
Quite a few.
We're good. Thank you. Yep, hold on. Colonel, do you want to talk about the rally at the Capitol?
Good morning, Colonel Bogoyevich with the State Patrol. We are aware of the demonstrations across Minnesota, including the Capitol and across the nation. We will work with our state partners and our local partners to provide security and safety for those that attend.
Christy Miller, Pioneer Press, can you confirm that you will have a sniper station at the Capitol today?
The question was, will we have a sniper at the Capitol?
Okay, so let's just see if there's any kind of update on this. But it's just so horrible. Doesn't look like they caught the person yet. But once again, I do think that these political attacks are going to be more and more common, even if it is just DHS goons throwing a Democratic senator to the ground, pulling his hands behind his back, cuffing him, just treating him inhumanely for like 15-20 minutes before they're releasing him. As inoffensive as that, all the way to a lead top Democrat in the Minnesota state legislature getting assassinated in her home alongside her husband and her dog. And then that killer driving 15 minutes away and shooting a state senator. So it really is just indicative of the time that we're in. And everyone, just stay safe.